I'm standing outside of WJFW studios in Rhinelander, just one community among hundreds that span the largest congressional district in the state. So I asked each candidate what they are going to do to make sure all of their constituents' voices are heard.
I am not afraid to go into a room and say what needs to be said on the behalf of people of northern Wisconsin. I know we have a lot of diversity in our interests of this northern part of the state, but I also know that people here need a fighter, and that's what I will be.
Staying involved with the community is something that's always been personally important to me, and I think it's real easy to do that now. If I'm elected to Congress, I will continue to be heavily involved and make sure that we have listening sessions across the district and that we're hearing the voice of the people.
I intend to hold town halls regularly so I can hear their concerns, make sure that I'm doing the job that they elected me to do. They can also reach out to me by email, by phone, but it's important to me to be incredibly accessible so that their voice is heard and that they are properly represented.
So I will have somebody on staff, as well as myself, as much as I can, working with the community to spread the word, garner support, and to help the consortium of county commissioners to put together a feasibility study.
It's important to know what kind of immediate action a congressperson would take if elected. For Tom Tiffany, it's delisting the Timberwolf. I asked all of the congressional candidates what kind of bill they would write first if elected.
We really need to take on Big Pharma. The cost of prescription drugs is skyrocketing, and so that would be the first bill I'd write.
The first bill that I'm most concerned about, and I think everybody should be, is the loss of our small family dairy farm operations.
Well, I would like to give more opportunities for people to be able to sell their products, whether they're farmers or manufacturers, so I'd like to work with the president on more trade deals.
Probably the first one that I do is delist the Timberwolf. The science says that they should be delisted, and it's way past time that the wolf was delisted.
In the landmark 1970 Roe v. Wade case, the Supreme Court ruled that a woman's right to choose to have an abortion falls within a constitutional right to privacy. This landmark case effectively legalized abortions in the United States, but recently there has been talk among Republicans to revisit the case. So I asked the candidates, do you support overturning Roe v. Wade?
I support the repeal of Roe v. Wade. I believe it was decided back in the early 1970s incorrectly. I don't believe that that's a right. Abortion is not a right in the Constitution. And once again, we should return that decision to the states. Allow the states to make the decision that they want to make.
I think Roe v. Wade was an example of super legislation from the Supreme Court when it was passed, when it was pushed through by the court in the 70s. I'm not a fan of its construction. I think that was taking power away from legislators, who I think are the proper authority in this matter and not the courts.
75% of the women in this country support the right to choose. There's a very vocal, well-financed minority that isn't. And I think it's their opinion, but it shouldn't be something that made into federal law that would undermine a woman's right to choose.
I support an individual's right to bodily autonomy, and that's what the language is, not just actually Roe v. Wade, but Planned Parenthood v. Casey. I mentioned I'm a constitutional law professor. I have to teach these cases to my students routinely, but I don't think that the government should be involved in those decisions.
I'm standing in the server room at ChoiceTel, a small Eagle River company that provides broadband access via fiber optic cable to the home. But many people here in the Northwoods are still without basic access to broadband. So I asked all of the congressional candidates, what will they do to make sure more rural people here in the 7th Congressional District have basic access to broadband?
Rural districts like ours, the ability to set up a municipal system. And this would provide lower prices. It would provide more people with the opportunity to have broadband.
That is something I would work on. I mean, I see that as something that could be possibly part of a farmer relief bill, but not just specific to farmers. As you know, the bills tend to have lots of different components to them. So this is something that can definitely be worked in a variety of ways.
Local communities know how to best govern themselves, and certainly more than a bureaucrat in Washington. So while I want to expand the access because I do think it's something that's important, I don't want to just say I'm going to go to Washington and basically exert a ton of federal authority over local governance.
And that's something I'm really going to delve into if I'm elected, is to make sure that these companies are effectively using our tax dollars at the federal level to get more broadband service to people in northern Wisconsin. I think there's a better job that can be done by some companies.
CBD stores like this one in Tomahawk sell products derived from hemp, a cousin of marijuana with no psychoactive properties. Marijuana-based products are still illegal in Wisconsin and illegal on a federal level as well. So I asked the candidates, would you support the federal legalization of marijuana?
Yes, I would support the legalization of marijuana on a federal level. And that would be to protect people from being felonized for using a substance that shows no harm to others.
I certainly support legalizing medical marijuana. The reason I support marijuana otherwise in certain amounts is because we can also use that revenue and benefit from that, and we can use our resources towards addressing violent crimes. That's what we should be doing.
If you legalize this product, you're basically giving the states free right to tax it. And when they tax it, I've never seen a state government that doesn't find a new tax it doesn't like. And when you do that, you're going to continue the criminal market, because eventually you're going to be able to have a criminal market that doesn't pay taxes, undermine it. So I think we need to look at this in a proactive approach, and at the moment, if it doesn't reduce the crime rate, I'm not a fan of it.
So I don't think that should happen at the federal level. I think the states should decide whether they want to legalize marijuana or not. Now, you have a marijuana on, I believe, Schedule 1 at the federal level, which means it's a narcotic that it's very difficult to get research done. And I think it should be taken off that Schedule 1 at the federal level to allow more research.
Here's video from the 2016 floods in Ashland and Bayfield counties that caused more than $30 million in damage. Scientists say climate change leads to stronger storm surges and floods like this one, and that's just one of many problems a changing environment brings to Wisconsin. So I asked the candidates, how would climate change factor into your legislating?
And I think the best thing that we can do is always incentivize innovation. For me, yes, we have some of those pristine rivers, lakes, forests in the world, and we should always do what we can to protect them. But I'm not going to pass regulation that stymies innovation.
Are humans causing climate change? I think that's still very much in question. But if there is a proposal that's brought forth to reach some broad climate change agreement, China and India have to be included.
Making sure that EPA has more control over the fracking operations to limit the methane releases, as well as the industrial dairy farms and their methane releases.
We absolutely have to protect the environment. We need to ensure that we have clean air, clean water, and our beautiful land stay protected for generations to come. We cannot let corporate greed destroy our lands.
Health emergencies can happen at any moment. And if you're one of 44 million Americans without health insurance, that can bankrupt you. And even if you do have insurance, those medical costs can add up quickly. So I asked all of the congressional candidates, what would you do to make health insurance more affordable?
I think there needs to be more affordability in healthcare, and that comes through price transparency when you go to the doctor, and being able to buy or exchange health insurance across state lines to bring more competition into the system. That's how I believe we can resolve a lot of the issues that we're facing today.
And I think there's a variety of things we can do, everything from direct primary care, where you get the insurance companies and government out from the middle of doctors and patients. But to me, it's all about choice, competition, and transparency. If we do those three things, I think we can have more affordable health care.
This Medicare for All would be a way to make sure that all Americans are insured, and that would also make having health care a right and not a privilege.
Not everybody has access to private insurance, and people get sick. That is a reality. Nobody should die because they can't get to the doctor. Nobody should go bankrupt because of a medical emergency. We need to have a public option for those that want it and those that need it.
I'm standing at Malley Farm Incorporated near Anago. Unfortunately, small dairy farms like this one are becoming rarer every day. Just last year, more than 800 Wisconsin dairy farms closed down. So I asked all of the congressional candidates, what would you do to help local dairy farmers?
Get a supply management policy instituted. And we have to do that federally, since there seems to be no intent by the Republican leadership in Wisconsin.
We need to address the farm crisis, ensure that they have access to competitive markets. We need to eliminate predatory business practices, whether it's predatory lending practices or otherwise. We need to have broadband access for our farmers.
Part of it is giving them more access to outside places to sell their products. I think passing the USMCA should have been done a year ago. I think the fact that it sat in the Congress for as long as it did was this large disservice to the people here in northern Wisconsin, certainly dairy farmers.
A few years ago, there was something proposed called the Waters of the United States, which would have regulated every drop of water in the United States, and it would have had a really harmful effect on our agricultural industry, especially farmers. I want to make sure things like that don't happen that would be harmful to dairy farming.
Last year, Florence County started a North Woods tidal wave of Second Amendment sanctuaries. Langlade County is the latest to consider the largely ceremonial gesture, telling state lawmakers to keep their hands off guns. I asked the congressional candidates if there is any need for gun regulation at the federal level.
The first thing that should be done is we have a lot of gun laws that are on the books. What is happening in many jurisdictions around the country is they're not enforcing the existing laws. Enforce the existing laws first before we create new laws.
So whenever there's a new law being proposed, I always ask the question, is all it doing prohibiting someone who is a law-abiding citizen from doing what is already a right? So for me, I am not a fan of the legislation that's being proposed in the state and certainly nationally by people who are restricting gun ownership.
I see the active shooter drills that my son has to endure as a student. I made it my whole academic career, never had to do one. We have a situation in this country that needs to be addressed with meaningful action that doesn't impede on the rights of individuals.
I support the ban on assault weapons. There shouldn't be any more sale of assault weapons. They have already proven to be, they've already mass destroyed.
So whoever you think can represent the district best, remember to vote on February 18th or earlier with an absentee ballot. In Rhinelander, Dan Hagan, Newswatch 12.